Legends of a man-eating tribe, cannibals who seek to eat their enemies' flesh so they may become like gods. It's 1961. A young man is in search of rare tribal art. He ventures deep into the jungle, where he meets a tribe that still enjoys the delicacy of human flesh and headhunting their enemies, so they may steal their souls and knowledge. Michael Rockefeller, a naive 23-year-old anthropologist from New York, has turned away from the family business in search of hidden treasure somewhere at the end of the world. He has made one successful voyage to the island, but then decided to return for a second trip for precious art. Rockefeller and Dutch anthropologist Rene Wassing were in a 40-foot canoe about 3 nautical miles from shore when their double pontoon boat became flooded and overturned. Their 2 local guides swam for help. After drifting and drifting, early on November 19, 1961, Rockefeller said to Wassing, "I think I can make it." He then swam for shore after throwing off most of his clothes. At this point, the boat was roughly 14 miles from the shoreline when he had made this crazy attempt to swim to safety. Supporting the theory that he died from exhaustion or drowning, or perhaps crocodiles and sharks. Wassing, on the other hand, was rescued the next day, but Rockefeller was never seen again. There was a strong search effort. His disappearance was a major world news story, simply because he was a Rockefeller. His body was never found, as far as we know, and he was declared legally dead in 1964. There are many theories surrounding his disappearance. Some claim he wanted to vanish and was happy in the jungle amongst the natives there. Others claim he was a naive fool and he mistook how far the shoreline was and likely drowned. Meanwhile, some proof may exist that he, in fact, swam or floated his way to the shoreline. Whether or not he was dead or alive when the native cannibals living on the island found him is also argued. Within all these theories, there is one very dark theory that stands out amongst the rest. He was killed with a spear, and then dismembered and eaten by the tribe of cannibals for revenge against the Dutch killing of 5 tribal members many, many years before. The Rockefeller family paid a man $250,000 if he could produce evidence that Rockefeller was either alive or dead, or explain just exactly what perhaps befell the young man. After countless interviews with tribal members on the island, one story stuck out: the description of Rockefeller in his underwear. According to Rene Wassing, Rockefeller had stripped down to his underwear when he began his 14-mile swim back to shore. The investigator also claimed a man was wearing Rockefeller's glasses. But could he have perhaps been given these glasses as a present at a different time? It is hard to say, as I am sure he had more than one pair of glasses. And just why, if Rockefeller had befriended these tribes, did they turn on him this time? This much doesn't seem to add up. However, there are many tribes that inhabit Papua New Guinea, and not all are friendly towards outsiders. The last detail was the investigator allegedly brought back 3 human skulls to the Rockefeller family. These skulls were claimed to be of white men that were given to them by the tribe. Has the DNA ever been confirmed in the skulls? That one, in fact, was perhaps Michael Rockefeller? This much we do not know. One final claim is not only did Rockefeller make it back to shore, but he successfully integrated with the cannibalistic tribe. Some footage was taken in 1969 off the shores where he had vanished, depicting a white man rowing with a tribe. However, this image is far too blurry to confirm whether or not it was him. Many people have been led to believe that the last place you would expect something bizarre to happen is in the middle of a field somewhere in England. Even stranger, this bizarre event dates back hundreds of years, long before cameras, long before scary movies. But no, people in the olden days, the Middle Ages, only spoke that which they actually saw. There was no reason to lie. If something was frightening enough, it was a peasant's duty to tell his fellow villagers. Or if the high and mighty, such as a knight in shining armor, saw something, he also had an oath to his king or queen to uphold. And therefore, when we look back into history at bizarre events, we realize there's a truth to behold and uncover when we try to understand just what it was they saw. This is one of those stories. It was August 22nd, 1678, Hertfordshire, England. A rich farmer who had 3.5 acres of oats which needed to be harvested called upon a poor peasant of the land. The rich farmer asked the poor peasant of labor to mow the oats down. When it came to the point of how much the rich farmer would pay this poor man for the sweat of his brow and marrow of his bones and hard back-breaking work, the farmer offered a very, very low wage. To which this poor, hard-working laborer became angry and said that was not a fair wage. The rich farmer replied by saying that he had other land which he would not employ him on if he refused to take the wage. The poor peasant countered with a much higher but fair offer as to how much he should be paid. The rich farmer became angry and replied, "I will never pay you that much for your labor. Peasant, be gone. I will rather simply employ the devil himself to mow down my oats." Some time had passed when word of a bizarre event began spreading across the village. The tale that was told was the Field of Oats looked as though it was on fire. On fire one night when strange lights from the sky began beaming down. When the sun rose the next day, many villagers had passed by this field of oats, seeing it was in fact mowed down in a perfect pattern. But by who? They were unaware that any person could mow oats so well. Word of a bizarre event reached the rich landowner, who then came to his field and said, "Indeed, the devil himself had laid siege to this field, and he could now harvest his oats." This is the first account in Western European history of what we now call crop circles. It was detailed and recorded in a pamphlet explaining the entire calamity that had come to pass. In our modern times, we often think of crop circles and alien activity as being modern phenomena. Alas, such bizarre and unexplained events have been transpiring for hundreds of years. According to the 12th century chronicler, William of Newburgh, during the tumultuous reign of King Stephen of England, 1135 to 1154, a rather strange and curious incident occurred, which is only believable because of the many credible witnesses. The chronicle states that a boy and girl emerged from 2 holes in the ground just outside the village of Woolpit, Suffolk. Bedraggled and bewildered, they were found by harvesters, who took the children to the next village. They spoke in a language unknown to the villagers. They wore clothes of a strange color and texture, and they only ate green beans, and their skin was completely green. Ralph of Coggeshall, in a writing in the early 13th century, explained that the boy eventually became rather ill and then died, but the girl slowly lost her green color and recovered 100%. The young girl later learned to speak English, and as a young married woman, she told others of her strange story, her mysterious origins. She claimed that she and her brother had come from a country where everyone had green skin, and the sun was dull and green. One day, they stumbled upon a cavern and emerged into our world. Dazzled and enchanted by the bright sun, they decided to stay. More than 700 years later, there is still no answer for what exactly happened in this unsolved mystery of the Children of Woolpit. In the Middle Ages, in the year 1374 in Aachen, Germany, completely out of the blue, a massive amount of people walked out of their houses. And according to some witnesses, it appeared as though they were in a state of delirium or madness. They were jumping around, flailing their arms and legs, and dancing like they were complete maniacs. This was just one of the first reports of a strange and unknown outbreak, perhaps a disease of what was later called the dancing plague, or choreomania of the Middle Ages. In the year 1518 in Strasbourg, another rather famous flare-up continued. This time, the dancing plague took over the entire town. A local woman named Frau Trophea kicked off the bout of bopping, and in a few weeks, 400 of the townsfolk had reportedly come down with this strange, bizarre sickness. Medieval church authorities believed it was either demonic possession or a curse. In Italy, spiders were thought to be the cause. Locals called it tarantism because they believed the arachnid venom was bringing on the delirium. One modern explanation is the psychological stress, which came from severe bouts of famine and disease. Another scientific theory is ergot poisoning, the result of dodgy rye, which can bring about hallucinations, involuntary movements, and delusions. However, the precise cause of the medieval dancing plague still to this day remains unsolved. A long time ago, in a place far away, there were kingdoms with small and quaint villages in what is now the region of Germany. Amongst the many fairy tales that were passed from village to village, there existed one particular legend that sent chills down the spine of many a woman or child that heard it. It was the legend of Der Erlkönig, or in English, the Elf King or Alder King. But not just any king, an evil king of fairies, the woods and trees in which it ruled. This king of deep dark woods was unusually great in size and strength, and had lust for revenge that could only be quenched by the blood of a foolish victim that wandered off the beaten path in the deep, dark woods, or the Black Forest. But what exactly made these medieval villagers believe in such dark tales? According to a few books and tales passed down from father to son and mother to daughter, every summer when children wandered into the forest to play games or collect berries, many would not return. Many would vanish in the darkness of the woods. Although often with a group of children or brothers and sisters, these children would wander just a few feet away, and when the other children turned to yell their name, they were gone. But where had they gone? They had gone in the blink of an eye. Although it is easy to vanish behind a thicket of branches and bushes and old dead trees, these children simply lack the ability to move fast enough to run away. It is easy to see how stories and legends of missing children then came about. But instead of the big bad wolf taking them, or an evil peasant with a pitchfork, it was in fact the Elf King, or as many call it now, the tall man, who took these wandering children. Many villagers claimed at different points while walking alone with friends in the evil Black Forest, they would on rare occasion come upon a child or woman being snatched by this evil creature. They made drawings and paintings of the tall man, this tall Elf King monster, which lurked amongst the trees. Some villagers went as far as claiming at certain times of the year during harvest, the Elf King, the tall man, would come to the edge of the woods where the field being harvested met the trees. Tall man would then lurk out slowly when a villager turned his back to the trees while toiling and harvesting the wheat. It was at these vulnerable moments the tall man would use ghastly length of his legs and arms and reach out and snatch the villager, hard at work to satisfy his unquenchable thirst for human blood. What are we to make of these tales in modern times? The Elf King legend became the Gross Man, or as we know in English, the Tall Man, which then, in different variations in different films, like Phantasm, and then later on, the Slenderman. Is there any truth to any of these legends or stories? Or perhaps it was just one way to convince medieval children to not wander into the woods alone, as many threats aside from the evil tall man lurked, such as wild wolves, bears, crazy witches that lived so deep in the woods they could never be found. In the year of our Lord, 1585, at the height of the English Renaissance, when an exploration on the high seas for the sake of the British Empire under Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth I, an attempt to found a permanent colony off the coast of modern-day North Carolina was made by Sir Walter Raleigh, hence the name Raleigh, North Carolina. This would be the colony of Roanoke, or as many of us know it now, the Lost Colony of Roanoke. A second attempt will be led by John White, whom against his will, upon arrival in the New World, was forced to stay on the island by Simon Fernandes, a Portuguese navigator and pirate for plunder on the high seas. Fernandes' treachery spearheaded the first calamity that would befall these unfortunate souls, left to use the same island in July of 1587, where 15 soldiers were stationed who had vanished, leaving only their bones, which told no tale of their sinister downfall. John White and the colonists disembarked from the ship, only moments later wanting to leave the island and go farther down the coast to Chesapeake Bay, the original intended landing spot. However, for unknown reasons, the ice-cold Portuguese scoundrel and part-time pirate Fernandes refused to let White and the colonists come aboard the ship and go down the coast to a better location. This rather unfortunate situation left the colonists feeling marooned on this little island, and thusly henceforth at the mercy of Mother Nature and the unknown threats lurking in the wilderness. Some believe the two-bit scoundrel Fernandes was in a hurry, having plans to head down the coast and lay siege to Spanish galleons dripping in gold doubloons, setting the ships afire while plundering the gold and letting the Spanish to be eaten slowly by bloodthirsty sharks. Fernandes lived on the edge, somewhere between this world and the next. He had a great distrust and wretched hate of his Spanish enemies, but he too would be swallowed by the high seas a few years later near the Azores, when he vanished from the records. White returned to England late in November 1587. However, due to a conflict between Spain and England, Queen Elizabeth grounded all the boats. It would be more than 2 years later when White finally returned to Roanoke in August of 1590. Nevertheless, in the words of William Shakespeare, a fool thinks himself to be wise, but a wise man knows himself to be a fool. This fool's attempt to rush in, establishing a colony on the edge of virgin wilderness, is where this timeless tale of mystery and intrigue begins. Although the colony was founded with over 112 people in 1587, when White and the ship returned in 1590, the colony was deserted. According to John White, there were only a few clues left behind as to what may have happened. On the tree, there was a word written, Crow, C-R-O, and Croatoan carved into the palisade post, referring likely to the Native American group. In addition to the carved words, the houses had been taken apart and disassembled. There were no boats left behind and no supplies left behind. White also added his 3 trunks he had buried had been dug up and looted. My own thoughts would be this indicates a level of planning and time taken to perhaps reuse the lumber and thatch from the houses to rebuild elsewhere. We should also consider it is likely only White's daughter and friends were aware he had buried the trunks, not the natives. Therefore, it seems logical to me that they knew things were not going well and packed up slowly in the summer of 1588 when John White had not returned. Often, people completely overlook the point of view of the English colonists. Think for just a moment, if you will. If White was supposed to return within 3 months but did not, how long could they wait? How long would you wait? It is unlikely they left in the middle of a winter when the ground was frozen. This is also evident by the fact that they had dug things up, and perhaps thought his ship sunk on the way over or the way back, thusly losing hope and thinking their best hope would be to move elsewhere or join the native Croatoans, hence the word Croatoan. We must also consider the fact someone took time to carve not once but twice to indicate Croatoan. This also lends credence to the idea they were not all killed, or even if some had been killed in a quarrel, some obviously survived. White believed this indicated they left with the native tribe when he had not returned with ample supplies. Nevertheless, we are still left to this very day in the year 2023 asking the same question. Where did the colonists go? The first theory presented was White believed the colonists had moved to Croatoan Island, which is about 50 miles south of Roanoke Island. However, he was unable to find them because a massive storm came in and caused them to head south for a few months, but then blew them off course even farther and then back towards the Azore Islands near Portugal. White never returned. There are other theories about what happened to the colonists. Some believe that they were killed by other unfriendly Native Americans. Others believe that they were assimilated into the Native American community. Yet others believe that they simply moved to another location that has yet to be found and started a new life. Some clues, according to other explorers years later, claim there were natives on Hatteras Island wearing English clothes, and some allegedly had blue eyes and could speak a bit of English. And perhaps they had mixed with the tribes there. The mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke continues to fascinate people today. The English colonists left behind by John White were low on supplies and marooned in the wilderness of the New World. At some point, they likely fled the island of Roanoke and took a detour into the unknown, never to be seen again, leaving a tale for the king of dark tales to tell. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, clicking the like button, and turning on the notifications. The Alaskan Triangle. The early pioneers that ventured into the deep, dark woods referred to this area as the Alaskan Triangle. Since the late 1980s, more than 16,000 people have vanished in Alaska. But why? Imagine for a moment, if you will, 3 friends traveling down a winding road, traveling perhaps to get away from something, or looking for the adventure of a lifetime. Only moments after stepping out of their car, the 3 friends separate. One walks into the forest by themselves. As the first one walks in, she notices a strange odor. Meanwhile, a fog has slowly crept down the mountainside, like a spider creeping up on its prey. The other 2 friends walk in after her, but she is gone. She can hear them yelling for her, but when she yells back, they cannot hear her. And it is precisely this detail that makes us begin to wonder just what exactly happened to her. Did she step into another dimension? Do portals exist in the Alaskan Triangle? Are these portals invisible, or can you see them as you approach them? Do they pull people in, or are you lured in by a faint voice calling for help? Is this perhaps an explanation for people vanishing in the Alaskan Triangle and national parks of the United States? Or perhaps we are letting our imagination run wild, and there is a more rational answer. But what? Is it people simply become disoriented when hiking in the mountains? How do you become disoriented the moment you step outside of a car? No one questions people falling and vanishing or going missing, but not everyone becomes ill when out in the wilderness of Alaska. Many experienced hunters, hikers, and fishermen have also become lost or vanished. Then, considering people having GPS and smartphones, it makes the entire situation even more bizarre. Could magnetic activity or tectonic activity have something to do with the electronics malfunctioning in people's phones or compasses? Planes crashing, instrumentation in the planes going wrong, and then the planes vanish forever, or only reappear in areas that have already been searched years later. What else lurks amongst the trees and hills? Although accidents happen and sometimes wild grizzly bears, hungry for a fresh kill, may play a very small part in some disappearances. Animal predation cannot logically account for the thousands who have vanished without a trace. Could there be an unknown predator? Perhaps the Bigfoot or Sasquatch. But why? Why would Sasquatch prey on humans? It is said most wild animals can smell a human from a mile away. Then why would such an animal, if it exists at all, choose to attack a creature that is not normally part of its natural diet? There are also tales of sea creatures coming up near boats, attacking people, mermaids or mermen, perhaps. The stories go as far as claiming men being pulled from their canoes in deep Alaskan rivers by evil mermaids who have a great disdain for humans and their habitat. Other theories claim evil gnomes that run amok in the woods, waiting for a simple roadkill as an easy meal, but occasionally find a child wandering in the Alaskan wilderness near a national park and make haste to turn that child into their next meal. We mustn't forget the reports of giant flying birds. Giant flying birds who allegedly have been stalking hikers on the mountainside, with reports of wingspans up to 30 feet. Could it be, perhaps, there is a prehistoric giant vulture swooping down and tearing people to shreds? Is this what they call the Thunderbird? The Native Americans shared such folklore amongst their tribes and the Alaskan Triangle. Small villages such as Portlock, Alaska, also claimed it was wiped out by devilish ghouls and creatures like the Sasquatch. Then there's the harsh Alaskan weather itself, never to be underestimated. How many succumb to freezing temperatures on their walk home, only later to be dragged away and eaten by a bear for a midnight snack? The weather can change in Alaska in the blink of an eye without a warning, which is why only the toughest people can bear to live in the Alaskan Triangle. Whether it is portals, Sasquatch, evil gnomes, mermaids, mermen, or some evil sea monster taking people, something doesn't add up to a hill of beans in these bizarre occurrences in the Alaskan Triangle. The Alaskan Triangle has become a hotspot for paranormal activity, missing people, Bigfoot sightings, strange legends of cryptid animals and creatures told over the centuries by native people that once roamed the wilderness in search of new hunting grounds. So it comes as no surprise when we see or hear of these strange events come to life in documentaries or see news stories. But rarely do we as rational people chalk such things up to legends that cannot be confirmed. One of these particular events that seem to occur over and over every year in Alaska is what is known as the missing people phenomena. Without jumping the gun or jumping to conclusions, many disappearances do not seem to add up, or specific details contradict how the person vanished mysteriously into thin air. But could there be animals we are completely unaware of that roam the Alaskan wilderness and stalk foolish hunters and hikers that veer off the beaten trails in search of better hunting grounds, as did the natives? Animals that outlived the Ice Age with very small populations hanging on by a thread, or perhaps animals that have mutant genes from coming in contact with human-made contaminants or radioactive contents that polluted their air and water supply at some point in the past. There have been sightings all over Alaska claiming to see giant, bloodthirsty polar bears. Some sightings claim they stand around 15 feet, 5 feet more than the largest polar bear, likely weighing more than 1,500 to 2,500 pounds. But should we believe these accounts of those who report them? What would they have to gain in telling such a tall tale? Let's back up for a moment. 150 plus years. The British were searching for a northwest passage to speed up trade. It was believed north of Canada, part of the British Commonwealth, there was a secret untraveled route, when found, could be traveled with ease during the warm summer months. However, the Franklin expedition never found it. According to the note left behind on the Erebus and the Terror, the two ships from the Franklin expedition that became marooned temporarily and then permanently, they were forced to spend the winter of 1845-1846 on Beechey Island. And then in the summer of 1846, they traveled down Peel Sound, off King William Island. The Erebus and Terror became trapped in the ice, forcing the men to spend the winters of 1846 and 1847, and then another year on, 1847 and 1848, on the island. The men were stalked by polar bears, which perhaps at first glance came as no surprise. There would be Arctic wildlife roaming and hiding in the 50-foot snowdrifts. However, the men were armed to the teeth, and they were trained hunters as well as seamen. Nevertheless, the men never expected these polar bears would lay siege to their encampment and rip some of them to shreds. Some of the men who escaped the attacks came back to the ship and its men with stories that terrified the entire crew. The story told was there was a giant polar bear that looked as much as 17 feet high that could not be stopped by bullets. However, these legends of giant ferocious bear gods have never been substantiated or proven, and remain a legend and a warning to those who think they can wander alone in the Arctic wilderness. Giant polar bears have also been sighted as far away as Greenland. They've been seen in Alberta and even Quebec. One story claims an older French lady in Quebec was allegedly sitting inside a tavern, sipping her hot chocolate, when she noticed a white blur on the hillside out the window. As she turned to look, she saw what she described as a giant polar bear. People nearby trembled in fear, and a group of men went out on an expedition of the surrounding area to track down this monstrosity. However, their search yielded nothing, and the story became a legend. If we ask scientists for their answer, some may claim perhaps there is some genetic remnant of what was once called the Pleistocene polar bear, Ursus maritimus tyrannus. Is it possible, somehow, there's a small population of these ancient polar bears still roaming the virgin wilderness of Canada or Alaska? There are also theories of more plausible natures. For example, there's a genetic mutation that occasionally occurs in many animals where their muscle structure is doubled. Double muscling is the term used to designate a muscle hypertrophy characteristics of cattle and Texel sheep. It is due to a mutation in the myostatin gene, MSTN, which encodes for the growth of regulating the factor myostatin. Muscle hypertrophy arises from an increased total number of fibers. Could this perhaps explain what so many people over time and time again have seen? A polar bear that looks like it has been using steroids and hitting the gym 24/7. Aside from giant polar bear sightings, there are other strange creatures afoot in the Alaskan wilderness. One of those creatures, some but few have claimed to seen amongst the native population, is the Kushtaka. The Kushtaka is a shape-shifting creature that looks to be half otter and half man. What a sight to behold. Could you even imagine the fear that would grip someone who came upon one of these creatures in the deep, dark woods just after sunset? However, some native legends claim they are in fact good-spirited and somewhat helpful to humans. But more often than not, they are considered to be treacherous and demonic in nature, and they love to deceive any fool that comes in contact with them. Like many other cryptid animals, it is claimed they will call out in the wilderness for help by screaming like a small child or woman in need. This is how they lure in hunters and fishermen who want to be a hero but instead are met with a grim and ghastly fate, never to be seen again. But there are even more cryptid legends from the natives. The Kilut, for example, which is considered to be an evil spirit a black hairless dog creature with red eyes. It only travels at night, and its footprints vanish in the snow, so it can slowly creep up on its victims and rip them to shreds. And then there is the Kalupalik legend. It is different, however. It is a creature that lives under the water with green scaly skin, but can appear to look almost human, like a mermaid or something. It has very long fingernails for tearing into flesh. Even stranger, and perhaps one of the strangest details I've ever read regarding this cryptid creature from native lore, is the belief that the Kalupalik wears human-like clothes sometimes. These human-like clothes have a pouch in the front for stealing babies. Do any of these creatures, if they exist at all, explain why so many people go missing in Alaska every year? Are these cryptid animals waiting in the darkness for that lone hunter or hunting party who thinks they are equipped enough, perhaps, to take on anything? Is it that particular naivete they prey upon? Legends go as far as claiming there's even a creature known as the Incinerata. The Yupik native legend claims they are small creatures that cause mischief and problems for travelers. They're able to disorientate those walking on the trails, and then they trap them deep inside their caves where their screams for help cannot be heard by the rest of the tribe. What do you think? Fact or fiction? Is there perhaps a better or more plausible explanation for those who go missing in Alaska and the Arctic Circle? Perhaps the weather alone, which claims so many lives during the long, brutal winters, is the answer. However, as I mentioned already, people vanish in summer. Sometimes they vanish right next to someone who turns around and says, "Where did they go?" So just how do we explain those situations? If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, clicking like, and commenting, and requesting. Thank you for watching. This has been the King of Dark Tales.